What I would say to women is understand what the company goals are, understand what your department goals are, and then by yourself or work with your manager to tie what you're doing to those goals so you can show impact and value. And then you have to talk about that. We don't do that enough as women. We don't promote what we've done. And you can do it to your manager and you can do it to other departments, but tying your impact, what you're doing, your work to a goal and showing the impact of that is the first step in getting visibility, right? So you're being seen as someone who thinks about the business, not just their role. We can get caught up in doing these jobs that are not important. And that's a conversation with your manager. Like, let's prioritize the things that are really going to move the needle.
Welcome to Beyond the Thesis with Papa PhD, your weekly inspiration for post-PhD career development. With me, David Mendes. Today, with me, I have the great pleasure of having someone with whom we're going to focus on the realities of building a career in spaces that weren't made for you, literally on that reality for women in particular. And joining me for this very important conversation is Kae Kronthaler-Williams. Kae is a powerhouse in tech marketing, a seasoned executive, and the author of Not Made for You. Over the past 30 years, Kae has built her way up from a telemarketing job to the C-suite of global software companies, all while navigating and challenging deeply entrenched gender bias in male-dominated industries. She's not just been breaking ceilings, she's been raising the floor for those who come after her. In this conversation, we're going to unpack tools that helped her thrive where she wasn't always welcome, resilience, strategic communication, and calling out bias without backing down. So if you're curious about how to lead with purpose in tough environments and how to build real change in the process, you're going to want to hear what Kae has to say. I think this is very applicable and important for women in STEM and women in academia in general. But STEM engineering specifically, I think, is still very male-dominated, or at least the perception is that it's very male-dominated domain. Yes. And I think the audience of Beyond the Thesis, be it women or partners of women who are in this domain, will really appreciate what you have to share. So let's go beyond the thesis and into the hard-won lessons of a true trailblazer. Kae Williams, thank you so much for being here today.
Hi, David. Thank you. I'm really looking forward to the conversation that we're going to have today.
Yeah, me too. And I think we're in an era today where it's getting clearer and clearer that even if we're talking about someone in academia, there are lessons and there are tools to be learned from other spaces, from other ecosystems, namely the business, the professional ecosystem. And, you've been in it and you've been, fighting your way and growing your way. And also you've been championing, because you're not just doing it for yourself, but also writing and sharing this message. So I really appreciate you being here today and looking forward to helping especially these young women, young scientists that are starting in their career and they are maybe seeing these or feeling these ceilings because they're glass. The idea is you don't see it, right? But you feel it.
Yeah.
And they're wondering, how do I cross this invisible barrier? So yes, I really appreciate you being here today for this conversation.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit more about you, about maybe origin stories of why you are here and why you are where you are today, championing this cause and sharing what you've learned. Yeah, let us know a little bit more of maybe pivotal point of where there was a before, some pivotal point, and then an after for you in terms of this kind of journey towards understanding some things and being able to share.
I think for many of us, women and marginalized people, we have these ambitions while we're in school, right? We're very excited that we're graduating from school and we're now going to start our careers, whatever that line of profession is. We're very excited about that. And I think women recognize or have been told that it could be difficult for them. because they're women. And so what I didn't realize was the way it would show up for me and how frequently it would show up as I was working through my career. I started as a telemarketer while I was going through college. And then I entered into the company that I was working at, started a software division, and I decided to go into that division. And it was a demotion, actually. But my manager, who by trade, she was a computer programmer, she said, I think you should still take this job because it will create a greater career path for you. And that's where I learned marketing. I did not study marketing in school. I studied economics. And so that's where I started to get into the technology industry. And I think it wasn't one thing necessarily that I thought, okay, this isn't working for me. It was a pattern that I noticed over time. So I would, in my career, I worked for a lot of large companies and then smaller companies and startups. So there's a lot of acquisitions that happen in tech. So you're always going to that next role. And what I realized was it wasn't just happening in one company. It wasn't that company and it wasn't that culture. I was seeing these patterns happen in most of the companies that I worked in. And so eventually, as you start to have these experiences, I started to realize that, two things. One, I need to figure this out because I am ambitious and I knew where I wanted to get to in my career. And two, that it wasn't necessarily me. Right? And a lot of women, we have this self-doubt and what am I doing wrong? Maybe I shouldn't have said that, or I'm too afraid to speak up. And so I started to defy that in a sense and had to force myself to feel confident to speak up in the rooms and navigate my career differently than some of my male counterparts. And so that started to work for me, obviously, because I've had a happy and successful career. And then I got to the point where I am now in my career. I do mentor a lot of women and men, but a lot of women. And I noticed that sometimes when women come to me with a problem that they had and I say, okay, here's how I would address it, and I give them the words to use, I see that great relief on their face that, oh, that actually isn't that hard. That isn't that scary. I think I can do that. I don't have to leave this job. I don't have to leave the company or find a new manager. I think I can handle this. And that's what made me realize I needed to have these conversations on a broader scale, like we're doing today on your podcast. And I wrote a book about it to help women understand how it could show up, because sometimes it's very subtle. So I use stories to illuminate how that can show up at work. Some of my stories, some of my colleagues' stories, and some famous ones. And then I give them the language to use in all those situations.
Yeah.
So it's very practical guide.
Yeah.
And that's how you and I came here today.
That's it. And language is so important. It's such a great key to some of these conundrums that we have. And in the end, you learn a word, a concept, and like you said, there's an aha moment of, oh, okay.
Yes.
Now, even just being able to call something that's fuzzy, being able to give it a name and then address it is, I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
Your book, it's titled Not Made for You. And,
Yes.
I've heard about this from guests in organizations that, it's something that culturally is still ingrained and systemic in a lot of ecosystems out there. I see it, even in academia. I also see it in academia. There's another, let's say, layer to it, which is often, and very often, and especially from graduate school on, people are coming from another country, sometimes like me, from another continent, and they're bringing from that cultural milieu also some aspect of the culture that also puts them in this space of, oh, this is not for you, right? Of you. Sometimes, often it's a question of relationship with hierarchy, and in some cultures it's very marked, and you don't address someone who's and here in Northern America it tends to be flatter. But there's the cultural aspect that I see a lot in academia. But of course, then there's just the gender aspect that is, I think, globally still there.
Yeah.
Now, can you share a specific moment, specific story in your journey that sparked this your awareness of this gender imbalance, or that kind of sparked the flame of, okay, you know what, I need to address this and write this book and share this to more people? Is there a story you can share on that?
I will share a story of when I said, I'm going to write this book. But before that, I said it was patterns that I saw. It wasn't one individual thing, but I did start to notice that women are not supported in their careers the same way men are. We don't get the same access to networks or special projects that typically advance our careers. Leadership is defined a certain way, and it typically is a white male. So, you start to notice those things because you are constantly fighting against it in a sense, right? You're trying to work around it. And so you do notice that. But the point that got me to write the book was I had been thinking about writing a book, not this topic, but I was in a board meeting and one of my colleagues, who was probably one of the most intelligent people in the room, was presenting. So in a board meeting, you're presenting your quarterly findings or your quarterly results for your department. Mine was marketing, and this person had another department. And so she was presenting and she was constantly interrupted and spoken over by the CEO and some of the other board members. And it was really bad. She wasn't, they took over her presentation, but they were basically repeating what she had just said. They're repeating it, and now the conversation ensues because a man said it. And it was frustrating for a number of us in the room. And after the board meeting, she came up to me and said, "What am I doing wrong? Why does this always happen to me?" And I almost answer her to say, well, you need to be more assertive and, this and that. And I thought, what am I doing? And I said, you're not doing anything wrong. It's them. It's not you. And so that made me say, I have to write this book now because it's happening too much. I've seen it too many times in my 30 years. And now these younger generation, it's still happening. And we have to start having this conversation and building awareness around it. And again, I think it's when you name it, as you said, and you speak to it, I think people are very understanding for the most part that they didn't realize they had that bias, or that they were, speaking through the lens of a bias that has, been for generations.
It makes total sense. And again, this archetypal story that I've heard before. It's so you confirm, with the story, given that you're with different protagonists, you're telling the same story I've heard again and again. It means that, it's systemic, and it's something that needs to be worked at still. Now,
yes. Yeah.
Now, one challenge that I see, and that I've seen even in environments that I've worked, is that within this culture where there's this bias and this expectation of men to take the front and center stage, often women, and here we're talking about a woman who is talking and is interrupted, but sometimes women, even from stories that I've heard, stop themselves from talking because they think, oh, my idea is not good enough, and they may even pass a paper for someone else to then bring the idea forward, because they understand instinctively that's the way the idea can move forward. But I've seen occasions where a woman, or women in general, will take on kind of a persona that is more male. They themselves in a way that if a man did it, everyone would be like, oh, okay, let's listen. But then because it's a woman, people say, oh, there she is. Okay, she's difficult, or oh man, she's so bossy, or there's a lot of bad, like negative connotation adjectives that come out. A bunch that come from, like feisty is one that comes up, and other not good.
Intimidating.
And I know this is, of course, because you've lived through it and you've given it a lot of thought. You, I think, have advice to share on how to navigate this, how to claim that space, that agency, and take ownership of that voice and that stage, keeping your dignity, keeping your values, staying a part of the team instead of somehow kind of separating yourself. Because once people start saying these things of, you're becoming they're othering you in a certain way.
Yes.
What are your comments on that, and maybe strategies that you've thought about or advice you have in general?
I think, as women, it can be, and I talk to a lot of women, that it can be frightening for them to speak in these rooms. And the first thing I say is, we're all in this room figuring out, we're here to solve problems in the company. We're all figuring out as we go, including the CEO. Right? Like, you start to recognize we don't all come to the table with the answer. We don't have the answers. We're trying to figure them out. So that's just to take the human element. These are human beings just like you trying to figure something out. And I think that will help ease the stress of some of that. But I will say that I've noticed where there are situations in a room, for example, and it happens a lot, a woman says an idea and it gets kind of, they don't really react. And then men will repeat the idea. And I will see this happen so many times. And then the idea takes life, right? And so I've spoken to women that it happened to, and they're like, well, they just let it go. But when you're letting that go, or somebody's talking over you, when you let that go, the room is seeing you in a different light. It's reshaping your credibility in a negative way. And it does affect how people view you, and ultimately affects your advancement in your career. So if someone's stealing your ideas, when it comes time for promotion, David had all the great ideas when actually they were Kae's ideas, right?
Yeah.
And so we do have to address them. And there are a lot of them. It's very subtle. And that's why in the book, I use stories of my own experience and other women's to show how, illustrate how it could show up for you in the room, because you have to name it and say, oh, I know what they're doing right now. We call it heap-eating. When they repeat a idea of yours and they take it, we call it heap-eating. Or it's just that they're talking over you or discrediting you some way in the room. We have to know what it is and be aware of it, because sometimes it can be quite subtle how they say something to you, words they use. I just realized that I had a manager, when he spoke to a man, he didn't like that when somebody disagreed with him, and he'd go on the attack, men and women. But when he attacked the man, it was on a business perspective. You said this last week. You're going to do this, this is what you're going to do last week, and now you're saying this. Which one is it? With me, if I disagree with him, he said, oh, now you're angry. Or, now I've upset you. And so it was on an emotional level. So now everybody in the room thinks Kae's emotional and she's angry or she's upset. And so you have to address that.
Yeah.
Because you have to switch switch what they just said and acknowledge what they said, and then rephrase it and get rid of the bias.
I just wanted to leave you a little personal message. Right now, I am trying to walk my own talk and applying all that I've shared with you throughout these years of Papa PhD on my own job search. So I'm still here, I'm documenting my own job search process so I can eventually share what I learn with you. In the meantime, you can reach out and support the show on patreon.com/papaphd or on buymeacoffee.com/papaphd. Any little help will contribute immensely to keeping the Papa PhD mission alive. Thank you for being a fan. It makes me feel that there's different types of issues, because you said someone he's planning and then picking up the idea, or maybe reshaping it and saying, here's my idea now.
Yeah.
That's one problem to try and deal with. But then there's the just being talked over. That's another issue. Maybe we can start with the he's planning. Are we talking about the fact that, men will use a different way? So they'll hear the idea, maybe 2 seconds of it, and then pick it up, and they use a different, I'm thinking of, those word clouds. Their word clouds different, assertive or more authoritative. How do you kind of...
I don't think that's it.
No, yeah.
I don't think that's it.
I was just positing a hypothesis and
because
looking for what's your analysis and how do you protect yourself against that?
Yeah. So I've had men say the exact same thing.
No change. Wow.
No change. Same thing. But you have to recognize that we all have bias. And the men in the room, or people, not just men, women too, in the room, we always look to the man is more credible. They immediately have credibility. We have to earn our credibility. So by them saying something, even if it's the same thing I said, it's a man saying it, right? He's more strategic. Right? His makes more sense. And so that's what it is. It's a bias that we all have. Even women, we have to catch ourselves and say, why do we think he knows more than I know? Just because he's a man, right? Why does he have more credibility? And the answer for that one, and it's called repeating. The answer for that, and what I teach women is, or anybody, any marginalized person, because this goes to, as you said, people coming in from other countries, there's a lot of bias. And so for that example, if I said, I think we should have quarterly meetings with our customers, the next person, it's easy to steal. If I say, I think we should start having quarterly meetings with our customers because it will give us the ability to understand how they're using the product. Are they achieving the goals they're trying to achieve? Showing them value of the product so that we don't lose them, we retain them. Now I've told the whole story. That's harder for somebody to steal, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be data. You're not always going to have data because you're in the room and you're all, everyone's kind of brainstorming. So you might not have the data, but you have the idea. And there's a reason you had the idea. State the reason, not just the idea. So that's how you handle that particular one.
Mm-hmm. I love it. It's because you're showing the whole blueprint right away, they can steal your IP.
It's harder to do it. And it does work. And actually, when I was, working on the book, the women that worked in the Obama administration, they called it amplification because it was happening to them. And so they started always telling more than just the idea so that it couldn't be stolen.
Mm-hmm. Love it.
It is easy.
Yeah. And I totally see how it works. So he's explaining we have the strategy, which is straightforward. I think it can be a habit you develop.
Yes.
Because of these years of being in the meeting a certain way, you always tend to be tentative and just show a little bit at a time. It's a habit. Mm-hmm. No, each time I put something on the table, it has to have like my stamp on it, like show my artistry in a certain way or my creativity. And so I can't just give a tidbit because it's easier to steal. I think it makes total sense. Question of intentionally doing it and building this habit in how you present yourself and you act in these situations.
You are right. I get this question asked a lot. How do you speak in these rooms and not be nervous? Right? They're afraid. And you have to start small, like that, the example for heating, that's a good example. Or if somebody's speaking over you, you can say, John, I'm going to continue what I'm saying.
Yeah, that was my next.
Yeah, now you can say, now Kamala Harris is famous for putting her hand up and saying, I'm speaking, and then keep talking. Fine, that's perfectly fine. That might not feel comfortable the first time to do it, right? But you could say, and put your hand towards that person and say, John, I'm going to continue what I'm saying. And then I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, or I'd love to hear your idea. And then immediately keep saying what you're saying. Mm-hmm. And it does work.
Yeah.
I've done it.
No.
So those are things. And if you do it and it works for you, it may feel uncomfortable, but eventually it's not going to feel uncomfortable because you're like, oh, that worked. Mm-hmm. And I think the other thing that made me more comfortable in the rooms is you have to master your profession, right? And, a lot of women will know, they go in these rooms and they see these men that don't probably have the skills that you have. And you think, how did that guy get his job? Doesn't matter. You have to know your profession really well. I know my results. I know the data. I know everything I need to know. So when I'm in those rooms, I have the information and I have the confidence because I have data to back it up and I know what I'm talking about. That makes it easier to speak in those rooms when you have that background, when you understand your role and you are great at your profession and you're keeping up with your profession. Because most of the time in those rooms, nobody really knows your role better than you.
Mhm.
And you have to remember that and then be able to speak up.
I was going to ask something else, but this brings me to another very practical question. In a room where you're called into this huddle, into this meeting, no one knows who you are. Should you say, "Hi, I'm Kae Williams. This is my role," and then start talking? Is this something that could be important if you feel that actually these are a lot of unknown faces to present yourself, and that already sets the stage?
Well, usually I would hope that when you come into a room and there's a new person, they will do
They will do the introductions,
introductions.
of course. Yeah.
Yeah, typically. But there's nothing wrong with saying, hi, I don't know a lot of you. Can we just do some quick introductions and, I'll start.
Yeah.
Right. So I would do that. There's nothing wrong with doing that at all.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a great
Because
idea.
again, if somehow this didn't happen, that also could be just a blockage. You feel like, okay, maybe because it's easy to get into a room and imagine, oh, they all know each other and I don't.
Yes.
You're already going to retreat because of that. So it's okay to do it. But what I was going to ask was the following, because of course, I think because we're talking about cultures that come from behind, etc., the onus or the responsibility or of advocating for yourself comes onto yourself. But
Yes.
and I know we didn't discuss this beforehand, but does leadership have any role in this? Can a good leader actually see? Wait, she was sharing an idea. Let her finish, and then
Absolutely.
can do you have good or positive or negative stories or examples of the interaction with leadership? Because we are having this conversation and I'm really focused on imagining the women around the table. But here, I think if these problems are coming up, again, I think there's a problem with leadership.
Sure. So great point, right? I think, as a leader, I try very hard to bring my team into these rooms and make them more visible in the higher levels. Because I think that's important. As a leader, that's what you're trying to do, right? You're trying to help them develop and you want them to have the experience in that next level room. So that is something that is required from leadership. The other thing is, which I tell people that I mentor, collaborating in the company in different departments and building relationships in the company so they start to know who you are and your work because you're working on things together. I have this project. I think you could help me with this because of this reason. Can we chat through it? And you do that a couple of times. And now you have somebody who knows you and the bias is broken down a bit, right? They're not looking at you just as this female. They're like, okay, this is Angela in marketing and we've worked on a couple of things together. She's asked me my thoughts and we've collaborated. So now when that leader is in a room, they will mention you even if you're not in the room, right? They're going to advocate for you because they've seen your work. So that is a great strategy. Building relationships within the company, not only in your department and being collaborative. I mean, in my role, I have to be very collaborative because I work with product and I work with sales and, I work with customer success. So my role requires it, but I do it anyway. I collaborate with a lot of people and it's for that reason. And the other thing I'll say is, if you support somebody in a room, if you see someone being spoken over or someone stealing their idea and you say, wait a minute, let Maria finish what she's saying, or Kate just said that. Why don't we let Kate elaborate on that? Mm-hmm. They will do it in kind, mm-hmm. right? So if you start doing it and helping men too, it's not just women. Like if you're being supportive in those rooms to women and men, they're going to do it to you as well, right? They're going to help you as well. I've seen that happen.
Great. I think this is a great insight for people who may be listening and who actually are listening because they have a team and they see that there are issues and they want to be better leaders. And I think that's why I asked the question, because it takes two to dance. And yes. In this case, so the relationship or visibility and actually a rapport with leadership is important.
Yeah. Building those one-on-one relationships is really important.
Yeah. And this brings me to another part of the issue that I've seen in people that I've interviewed, but that I know also, who, especially women, they are very conscientious in their work, productive to a healthy extent. And I've seen women hit a wall. I do this awesome work, and I see other people, let's say men, because often has been the story that I've heard, not work as much or as well as I do, and they get promoted. And I think it's the same issue of visibility. Just building a better mousetrap is not enough. You need to be visible. You need to be seen. You need to advocate for yourself a little bit. And what I've heard was, and the person I'm thinking about, that what changed it for her was starting to build more that rapport and that being top of mind with her manager. And then that changed things for her. So what are ways to become top of mind, or to at least become visible, become known, remembered, even when we're not there? Because that's the goal is people think of your initiatives and of what you've done, even when you're not in the room. That's very powerful.
It can be difficult for women because we don't have the same casual networking that men have with each other. They talking about sports or what, they go golf, they go to dinner, they go for drinks. So we don't always get invited to those situations. And there is this bias of what a leader looks like, and it typically looks male in a lot of companies. So we do have a bit of this barrier. But what I would say to women is understand what the company goals are, understand what your department goals are, and then by yourself or work with your manager to tie what you're doing to those goals so you can show impact and value. And then you have to talk about that. We don't do that enough as women. We don't promote what we've done. And you can do it to your manager and you can do it to other departments, but tying your impact, what you're doing, your work to a goal and showing the impact of that is the first step in getting visibility. Right? Because you're being seen as someone who thinks about the business, not just their role. As women, that's a bias, right? We're great at just executing, but we're not great at strategy. And so men are considered more strategic, and that means better leaders in some people's minds. And so that's the first thing, is really making sure you're focused on the things that are driving the business forward, because that's why they hired you. And we can get caught up in doing these jobs that are not important. And that's a conversation with your manager. Like, let's prioritize the things that are really going to move the needle.
Of course. Have you ever been told, like, exactly, you or hear someone comment, oh, if you want to succeed, you need to be more like a man? Because we've been, I can see this mirror, and then we see a man, a suit on one side, then a woman, also on the other side. And it feels like the men have this advantage. We've established that historically, and today that's still the case. Are women being told, oh, you should act more like a man? Or is that something that doesn't happen anymore? And how can we actually demystify or unwrap that and actually tell women who are watching and listening, no, you have your superpowers as a woman that can really bring you into a great position in leadership. You don't need to imitate men in your organization to make it.
So when I was coming up in my career, we were told that in so many ways, like how we acted, how we dressed, all of those things, right? And it was difficult because they wanted you to be more masculine, but they also wanted you to be very feminine in the office. It was very interesting. Now, I don't think women are told to be more masculine, but the bias is still there on how we present, how we communicate, how we lead, if we're too empathetic or not. That's still there, right? The bias, and again, it's a system that we're all working in, men and women, and there's a lot of bias in that system. And that's still there for even the younger generations. I think that, how do we combat that? as you said, showing up as yourself. When you try and be something that you're not very comfortable in that, and you're not going to be comfortable sharing your ideas. If you show up as who you are, you're more comfortable in those rooms because you're being you, and you're more apt to share ideas, which is what helps you move in your career, by sharing great ideas. So yes, I think you have to show up as yourself. And I certainly tried to manage the way men managed teams when I was coming up, and I was a young manager. I started out pretty young as a manager, and I tried to manage people that way because the female manager that I had definitely tried to follow men. But I recognized pretty quickly that I didn't want to manage people that way. I do have more empathy as a leader. I do care about people, and you can care about people and still have great teams and build great teams, and they can still perform well, actually probably better. So I kind of let go of that pretty quickly because it just wasn't working for me to try and be like that. And so I would say, be yourself. And yes, you're going to be called a lot of things. I was always told I was very intimidating because I am direct. And as much as men are direct, when a female's direct, it has a different connotation.
Yeah.
But I didn't stop being direct because clear communication is required to be a good leader. So I still come to the table with my direct communication, and I don't care what they think about it. Now, I'm never rude. I'm always professional. There are people who are quite aggressive and rude, men and women. That I don't think has a place in business either. It doesn't matter what your gender is. But direct, clear communication is critical to be a good leader.
Of course. And then if we tie that in with what you said before of having actually real and meaningful rapport with the different members of your team, then there is space to be direct because that's not the only interaction that's happening. It's just one of the interactions. So it makes sense to me.
About that?
Rhetoric.
Yeah, sorry. Go
It's
ahead.
okay. I'll just make notes here with pauses.
Usually that shut off.
No
I
worries.
apologize.
And there, now there's a note in the recording.
There.
What I was going to ask about is based maybe on what's in the book or in other work that you've done with people, this question of being told to act a certain way, dress a certain way, and then this kind of dichotomy of, be like a man, but then also be feminine. Like, how you, it's like a split ball, right? But
Yes.
do you have like things, tools, scripts maybe people can use, young professional women can use when someone tells them to smile more, calm down, or be less emotional? Or we already mentioned when someone talks over them, but this in this aspect of sort of instruction on how to act, and so which to me is equivalent to don't be yourself. Look, this is how you have to be.
Mm-hmm.
Are there ways you've worked out, maybe with the people you've coached and trained, to deal with this and actually push back and say, no, look, I have my space and here's how I'm going to be, and you just have to accept it?
Sure. And, some of those things that you talked about are really microaggressions, and people are letting you know that you're different than them,
Mm-mm.
right? And there are ways to address it, and there's a lot of examples in the book on how to address certain situations, but you brought one up about, calm down. What I noticed is that if male and female are disputing something in a meeting, it gets uncomfortable. And the other men will get uncomfortable because they don't think, maybe, I don't know why they think that, right? If they don't think it's the right thing for a man to be, speaking aggressively to a woman, or a woman speaking aggressively to a man. And so I've had those situations where we're just, not agreeing. And, my boss said, okay, I think, you need, let's calm down, everybody relax. And I know what I mean by that, right? And it's more pointed towards me. And my response is, I'm perfectly relaxed. And I think this needs to be said. And then I keep talking. And then my boss at the time again said, I really think we need to calm down and relax. And my response was, again, I'm calm and relaxed, but if you need a moment, more than happy for you to take that moment. So I just redirecting it to them because I'm calm. Don't tell me I'm not calm, right? But you can't say that. Don't say, hey, don't tell me I'm not calm, because now you're getting into this dispute. It's simply you state, I'm calm, but if you need more time, I'm happy to do that too. Something like that, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of those situations, and there are ways to professionally and calmly make it clear where you stand.
Mm-hmm. Now, I love this. This is a super interesting conversation. It makes me think of many different things, some more practical, like, for example, I've heard it in different settings. And tell me if this falls within what interests you in terms of discussing, but women will be self-conscious about their voice, even if, imagine the tone is a little bit more, say, unnerved around the table, and they feel all the guys have these like baritone, whatever voices. And there's other bad connotation associated with women, like shrill,
Yes.
with just the fact that their voice box is what it is. Are there also ways to help yourself if you are a woman with a higher pitch voice, which is normal, still, and that's what makes you self-conscious, to help you not care about that so much and still find a way to have a voice at the table? And tell me if this is not an interesting...
No, this is fine. It's very interesting because, I have this very kind of dry, raspy voice, and I know that about myself, right? And so mine's a little deeper probably than some. And I get what you're saying. And I have had women who are a bit softer in their speaking and their mannerisms. I'm a little bit more animated. Some women are not. And here's what I would say. I mean, you could go to voice lessons if you wanted to, but it's not about your voice. It's about what you're saying. You're there to help the company move forward and grow. So it's about your skills and experience. And if you're speaking from that, who cares what your voice level is? And you just have to think that way, right? Because there's very intelligent women speaking in a room. Nobody cares if they're shrill or whatever it is. It's the words that they're saying, the ideas that they're bringing forward, the strategy that they're discussing. That's what matters, right? It's not what your hair looks like or what you're wearing or if you're tall or short, because that's another bias, right? Like tall people have more presence. I'm not tall. Those are things, but you can't worry about those things.
Mm-hmm.
It's about your intelligence and your experience in that role and what you're bringing to the table from that perspective, not your physical attributes.
Mm-hmm. So bring value to the table, and your voice will be, will shine.
Don't worry about your voice.
Yeah.
We all have different voices. Yeah. Who decided that a deeper voice is better? Where's the logic in that?
Yeah.
And that's what we have to start thinking about. Who made that decision? Who made the decision years ago that women always had to wear dresses? It's silly when we really think about it. And so that's how we have to tell ourselves those things all the time.
Amazing. Now, the time flew. I'm just looking at the time. I'm surprised because I feel like we've just started talking.
I know. It's true. It's been a great conversation.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for me too. And I love that we're being able to just, drill into this question, because it's so important. It blocks so many people and so many brilliant young women out there that are brilliant, and then they're not able to shine as much as they could because of these things. So I'm really grateful that we're having this conversation now. And so we're talking about all these ways to make things work, to advocate for yourself, find your voice, find your shoes, find your position at the table and your space, your agency. Now, imagine, and we were talking about how leadership has a role in there. Imagine that you've been trying these things and still you feel that this bias is there. You're not, because a lot of what you said, we haven't used this word. Maybe it's an old-fashioned word, but it's it's disrespect. I'm going to say it like that. A lot of it is.
Yes,
And this is continuing.
absolutely.
When do you set a line and say, okay, if this continues X time, or if this idea I have, which I know is the right one, doesn't pass, I'm leaving and finding somewhere else. Is this something you've seen people deal with or dealt with yourself? And what's your advice on, okay, this is maybe a toxic, which is a term used today,
Sure.
culture for me. I think I'm better off starting to look for the next chapter somewhere better.
Yes. So I did have that situation. I was working in a company and it was kind of a good old boys club, as I would say. It was pretty prevalent. And I've worked in male dominated spaces my whole career. And a lot of times as an executive, I'm the only female on the team, the executive team. So it wasn't that I wasn't used to any of that. This was just more extreme. And so I did try and address it, with my boss, who I think was quite empathetic, but, I wasn't getting anywhere. And I made the decision that I wasn't able to do a great job as a result. There were too many barriers. I wasn't able to do a great job and support my team, which was more important. And so I decided to leave. And so let me just explain what I talk about: thriving versus surviving. Surviving is you're going to work every day and you're just trying to get through the day. You have a bad manager, a bad product. There's a lot of things that aren't going well. You don't feel that you're growing. You don't care that you're growing because you're just trying to hold on and get through the day and get back into your car or get off that Zoom meeting. That is surviving. That doesn't help you grow in your career. Thriving is when you're in an environment that you feel safe to give your voice. You feel that there's growth opportunities and potential. You feel that you are valued in your domain and you can speak about your expertise. And you also feel comfortable asking questions in someone else's domain. You see people that look like you and act like you in all levels of the organization. And we're all accountable for the same things in all levels over the organization. That's a thriving environment. And there are companies that exist. So I think, and everyone has it, it's a very personal thing to decide whether that environment works for you or not. But that, you have to think about, what do I consider thriving, where I'm enjoying coming to work every day and I respect my peers and they respect me and my boss, etc. Those are the things you have to think about. And if you're not getting any of those things, I would say it's time to go look. And you've tried, like you have addressed it and you've tried and you're still not getting anywhere. Yeah, then it's time to consider another company.
It makes total sense. Now, there's one little challenge for me in this particular situation. And I have one more question I'd like to ask you after that. And anyway, I hope you have time to keep talking a few minutes more. But
yeah.
How do you present yourself, sell your profile, when you can't really give a reference of your current manager who is a mismatch with you, let's say it like that? How do you navigate that? So
meaning if you're leaving a company and you want a reference?
No, you understand, okay, I need to move, this is not working for me. And then you're starting conversations with other organizations, but often you're asked for references, but this current relationship with your higher ups is not good, and you feel like, this is not going to be a good reference.
So you remember how I talked about networking and building collaboration and relationships with other people in the company? Those can be your references. And honestly, recruiters and other companies never badmouth a company when you're in an interview. You never do that. We all know that. But you can say, and I've had to say for that company, I tried this for X number of months. It just wasn't a good fit. And they understand that. And, if they say they want references, you can say, okay, you understand that it wasn't a great experience on either side or for me. So I don't know what kind of reference you're getting. Now, legally, most companies, what they can say is your start date and that you did work there. They're not supposed to say anything else, right? But I've seen people go into LinkedIn and we often give our references. Companies know you're giving references of people who are going to say great things about you, typically. So a lot of times they will go around and find other people that you worked with and go ask. But that speaks to your character and how you behave at work with everybody, right? Being professional, kind, you have to do that, or you're not going to have a great reputation. But the answer to me is there's other people that you can use as references other than your manager.
Very good. And it makes sense. And I think building relationships is the one thing that my listeners might drone about again and again, because there's no other treasure like good, solid relationships professionally for working somewhere, but also for transitioning. And it makes total sense. Now,
as you move up in your profession, your next job is coming from your network. So I always tell people, build your network now. You need a strong network because the further you get up, that's where my jobs rarely come from a recruiter. It comes from somebody reaching out in my network saying, hey, are you available? Here's a role I have for you.
That's it. That makes sense. Now, there's one question. So there's one term that I'd like to clarify because I don't really grasp it completely in your book, which is managing up. It's the expression of women shouldn't manage up, that the rules should be rewritten and bias should be challenged. Can you explain this idea or this concept? Because if I think it'll help also other people understand it better and engage with your content better.
I think it isn't that everyone manages up, right? We do manage to we are working for somebody and we are managing, but you shouldn't just manage up, I think is the point, right? You have experience, you have your own value, and that isn't just based on what your manager's view of you is, right? So it's managing across, not just managing up, and building your own worth separate from your manager. It's not that you don't want to build a relationship with your manager or higher ups. Of course you do. You have to, right? But that's not the only focus for you, is to just manage up. Meaning, don't change who you are just to in their light. Be your authentic self and manage across and manage up.
Okay. So it connects back to what you said about good leadership and actually empathy and engaging with your team as well, horizontally, but also vertically in the organization. Okay, perfect. I understand. Thank you. Now, I have a last question for you, but before that, I'd love to share with the people who are listening where they can find your book, where they can find you online, maybe even write you, sharing their stories,
I would love
reacting to our conversation. What are your links? Where's the best place to find all these things? Reach out to you.
The book, Not Made for You, is on Amazon. It's on Goodreads and Barnes & Noble. But if you go to my website, which is Kae Williams, and that's KAEWilliams.com, it has links to the places you can buy the book. And also at the bottom, it has links to my social media because I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Substack. And you can join my newsletter as well. So then we can communicate. And I would love that if people, joined and actively participated in some of my LinkedIn and Instagram posts. That would be fantastic.
And I'll put all those links in the show notes of the episode so people can straight away. So now, as a kind of last section of advice to young women out there starting in their careers, you've written in your book, when you're the only woman in the room, the doubt runs deeper. And it makes me think that even if some of the young women, the young professionals, young scientists listening may not be the only women in the room, but very often they may feel like they are. So I think this advice can apply to all of them, because just thinking of myself, often you see maybe someone, appear and they're integrated in the team. Everything's going well for them. And then you end up feeling like the only one yourself anyway. So for anyone who's more in that situation of, I can't express my ideas, or they're stolen by other people because now you have tools to do it right, but I'm mentioning it and then it gets picked up right away, and then it's someone else's idea all of a sudden. And, if they're feeling lost or discouraged as to their career evolution, or that's a personal fulfillment, because, it also has to do with being happy in your complete and whole life. Do you have a last word of encouragement and advice for them? Some maybe advice on how to handle that doubt
Sure.
and give a first step forward to more agency, to more self-advocacy, more voice.
I would say that women who've read the book come out with a lot more confidence, because there's so many examples in there. So definitely read the book, contact me, happy to talk, all of those things. And I think that the first thing is we have to let go of that self-doubt. It's hard to do, but if you recognize it is not you, it is a system that was built by men for men, it's nothing to do with you. That allows you to detach from that emotional and thinking it's you, because we often think I'm doing something wrong. I'm not communicating well. It has nothing to do with you at all, frankly. And I think the other thing is building your support team, your support groups. So that is internally and externally. Having support is really critical. Something happens to you in a room, you can go speak to somebody and they can help you understand that it isn't you and give you back that confidence and help you diminish that self-doubt. That's really important. I have a strong network of people that I can go to if something happens, and I can talk it through so that I'm not having that negative, tape going in my head that I didn't handle this well. So there are strategies, as I said in the book, to help overcome almost all of these and do it professionally and calmly and still have a great and joyful career, because I have. But your support network is really important as well.
Very good. Okay, I've really enjoyed this conversation. I think you're doing a great job, and I think it's commendable that you've taken on this mantle of championing this question based on your experience and on your career. None of what you shared is super complex or
That's right.
requiring even, technology. No, it's all very applicable today advice. A lot of it is creating new habits on how to communicate in certain settings. And a lot of it is also changing a little bit of, your frame of mind around some things, because like you said, we are moving in frameworks that have been built a long time ago, often by men in this case. And we're all, as we navigate, we need to find our way through with those kind of unspoken rules. And so what we said about creating new habits has to do with how to deal with those rules in the day-to-day, and how to be able to be present completely within that framework. But the second part, the mindset or the frame of mind part, I think is also very important, because given that we're in that setting all day, every day, it's also imprinting on us. And I'm saying us, but I'm talking to women who are listening. And so there's also some work of taking a step back and think, why is it like this? Do I need to do it this way? No, I can follow my values. I can be who I am. And I think that's really important. And it's, for me, it really gives me hope that people who read your book and listen will be able to readily change something the next day, and then a little bit the next day, and then be able to really have a fuller, a positive experience of their professional life. Because like you said, if you're always, apart from all the other like mental burden that you have, you are on top of that acting as someone that you're not, eventually
Yes.
you'll burn out. And that's not us.
Yes, you will. Right. It's too much of an emotional toll to like have to switch this who you are when you come to work, right? You just come and be yourself. And you're right. I've seen women feel more confident now when I've spoken to them or they've read the book. Like it isn't difficult. They're just really practical strategies. So there is a way to have an enjoyable career in these environments.
Yeah. And just the last little thing that I love is that underneath all you said, that because we are still in a context where rugged individualism has still a lot of value, but you talked a lot about community, about two-way communication, about establishing relationships. And that's something I really appreciate. And I think it's important that we understand that you can only go so far with this rugged individualism,
Agreed. Absolutely. You're not going to be successful trying to do everything on your own.
Okay, this has been a really great conversation. I'm so happy that we connected. And I want to, in the name of all the listeners of Beyond the Thesis, I want to thank you for all you shared here today.
Thank you so much, David. I enjoyed the conversation. And I appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation with you and your listeners.
Beyond the Thesis with Papa PhD is produced by me, David Mendes. If you enjoy the show and want more of my work, please support the show on Patreon. Just go to patreon.com/Papa PhD and choose a tier. And if you just want to buy me a coffee, you can easily do it at buymeacoffee.com/Papa PhD. I'm David Mendes. See you soon.